Hello again and a warm welcome from my side. I'm Svea Becker and I'm from the SAP community team and I'm your technical host today. And with me, I have two prominent, very well-known speakers and really happy to have both here with me. We have Max Wessel, who is leading the SAP Learning organization as the Chief Learning Officer at SAP. And with him, we have Peter Langner. Peter is also a well-known SAP Mentor, and he is the Managing Director of the Advantas company, right? Did I say it correctly, Peter?
Yes, all good, Svea.
I'm sorry. All right, and now I hand over and give you the stage, Peter and Max. Welcome to the call.
Yes, hello. Also, welcome from my side. I'm very happy today to talk to you, Max, and I'm really wondering, you're the head of every learning, like internal, external, partners, customers, students. How can you achieve good learning for everybody? What is your secret?
Well, I think there's no doubt that it's a continuous journey. And the fantastic thing is that SAP's got a great team behind this, and we have a sort of simple vision. For those learners who are inside and outside of SAP, it is all about opportunity. And so the mission is create opportunity through learning and development for all. We need to deliver great experiences. We need to deliver great content. We need to tie that content to professional and personal development and make sure that we can measure outcomes. And if we keep marching in that direction, I'm confident that the experience for everybody in the community and everybody in our ecosystem will just get better and better. But Peter, you and I, have bonded much over the fact that it is a journey and we'll never be done with improving.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different offerings out now. What is the latest, and what can you recommend to look at?
Yeah. So this year we've made a ton of progress when it comes to the different offerings that we've brought to the market and where we've improved. You'll see the way I think about SAP's portfolio for all those in the community is that we range from the most bespoke, most hands-on training, where we bring our classroom training now fully equipped to be virtual in a seamless environment. And I can say, having audited classes in person and then transitioned, the way our instructors have adapted and really taken advantage of the tools in front of them is phenomenal. But you take that all the way through to self-service. And in fact, Ethan Jewett and I were having a conversation yesterday about the importance and the role of documentation, which you don't typically think about as a formal learning asset or a part of instructional design. But the reality is, when you're learning in the flow of your work, right? You're on site with a client right now thinking about, onboarding a new team for an S4 implementation, and there, the presence and availability of documentation content that's rich, that's robust, that gets responses, that can be asked questions about within the scope of the community in real time, becomes a really core element of that learning journey. And so throughout the scope of the most hands-on, most bespoke, will take you out of your day-to-day environment and put you in a setting for classroom training we want to give you three minutes of content that is perfect for the problem that you have right now. We need a spectrum of offerings. And you've seen improvement that's come in the classroom. You've seen improvement that's come through our digital offerings with Learning Hub. A lot of what you've seen is the consolidation this year. Hopefully, those of you who use Learning Hub, I know we've got Devraj on the call right now, but have noticed some of the improvements where we consolidate in things like live access, where we brought the certification journey inside. So you don't have to bounce from one SAP environment to another, but you can really come and get that premium digital experience, onboard, learn, train yourself all the way through certification. And then everything that we build around the periphery, right? So the improvements you see to the community, and there will be some announcements coming out at TechEd, hopefully from a functionality perspective, that makes it easier to organize, makes it easier to activate small groups, makes it easier to get local communities spun up and energized. All of that plays a critical role. And so I know I'm throwing out a lot, but I really think for students, for partners, for professionals, for employees, whatever it is, we need at that range. We need offerings that are in person, that are deep, to those that are broad and in the moment. And what we need to understand is at each one of those stages of your career, right? When you're just starting out learning about technology, to when you're becoming an SAP professional for the first time, to the first time you launch a company that's built on the back of SAP as a technology provider, we need to offer that range of solutions that helps you achieve your outcome.
Yeah. Well, what I experience is, especially now with the S/4HANA transitions, that people lack knowledge. Like I am the customers team, they need to get knowledge, and also the consultants. I must say, many of my colleagues are somehow stuck to the old world, and I have even seen in project that people implement things in an old ways, even using functions which are outdated, which will go away in some years. So how can we achieve this? How can we make people aware there is a change and really take the time to go to training? What would you recommend how to handle this?
The sort of quick answer, and a little bit facetiously, is we need to make it worth it. In part. And so a lot of that is on us to ensure that the learning content is there, it's robust, it's rich, and we help people understand, for instance, that we've correctly articulated the value of a BTP extension architecture appropriately implemented. Because I certainly hear the same thing, Peter, regularly in my conversations with CIOs, where they are concerned at the speed of an S4 deployment because they're concerned primarily that their architecture is simply re-implementing their ECC environment. And they know that given the architectural changes that we've brought to the product and that we built into the platform, that the speed, the extensibility, the general advantages, right, from a governance, security perspective, et cetera, that we put into S4 are coming when you embrace the architecture as is the to be state, not as the was state, even where we are backward compatible. And so for us, we need to make sure that that is a core part of the learning journey. And that similarly, we have role-based learning that is appropriately targeted at those individuals. So I just had a conversation with the CIO of a major customer based in China last week that was really focused on what can we do for, sort of the architects boot camp for the IT executives, those folks who came up through the trenches implementing SAP, but have been long removed from the discussion about, the S4 transformation, so they understand and appreciate what's going on. And how we talked about how that role-based journey really needs to change when you get to the folks on the ground who are managing the actual project. And we need to ensure that there's consistency of language, right? So if I think about this as a product manager, right, my background, I came to this role from leading an SAP product organization. I think about making sure we have modular content, and that modular content is consistent when it comes to the value proposition in the architecture, but believing that we need much deeper modules when it comes to educating his architects on the ground who are running the teams. And so if we can start to build that momentum, how we deliver not just world-class learning, but make sure it's deeply role-based, that we understand and empathize with the discussion that's happening inside of our customer environments, then we'll make it so much easier for you, for members of the community, for our customers everywhere, to understand the value proposition and manage easily the journey forward.
Yeah, I found out that, if I refresh my knowledge, I have to find a way not to invest too much time, because I already have knowledge about a specific module. On the same time, I want to upskill and also prove that I have the knowledge. And so I found certification a very good tool to use, especially if I want to onboard other consultants and I need to find out if they have the knowledge about S/4HANA. Then of course I always, in the interview, I have 2 or 3 questions in general to know if they are able to do the job, but I also ask for certifications, and many of them, they don't have it. And so what could be a good way what do you think about the value of certification? Does it play any role from your side of SAP? And what would be a very good, cheap and quick way for me to achieve such a certification and in this way upskill, you know?
So clearly, from my perspective, that role-based journey very much lends itself to a certification model, right? Because we have our architects who we can take through and get certified. We have our developers, we have administrators. Frankly, we have professional users that are not tech savvy for many of our lines of business, where we can continue to invest and certify. And I think certification is a really important part of the holistic landscape. And what we need to understand is certification needs to be an important enough signal of competence that, you know, it can be relied on, as you mentioned, more broadly. And if we're trying to make the ecosystem move forward, we need to reduce the friction to receiving. I mean, you mentioned what is sort of an easy and simple way to get certification. And I'd argue that in the past, we haven't necessarily made it as easy as it should have been. Right, you know, up until this year, one of the things that I changed in the first 6 months in sitting in this role was we unbundled the certification purchase process. Right, so we previously had to buy 6 certifications at a time, and on average, the individual SAP consultant who passed a certification took I think it was 1.7 tests. Right, so you had a number of people who wouldn't pass on first exam, but would pass on second exam. Still, the majority of people would pass if they went through the appropriate learning up front. And what that signaled to me was we're actually selling this 5-pack bundle. We're optimizing for where we think pricing, you know, sort of pricing at the supply demand should be set. But that's not why we get people certified, right? Like you just mentioned, certification can be this massive, valuable indicator of competence that allows people to move around. It allows us to encourage students to get invested in our ecosystem early. And so we made this massive change in unbundling the certification purchase process so people could, with reduced total investment, get access to that signal. The second piece of that certification journey that we have to invest in and make easier is access to the content, right? There are some things where it really makes sense that we send folks through, you know, extensive programs on site. I mean, I think I've mentioned this in the past with the mentor group, but at some level, you know, you have this transformative experience when you onboard to a new company, and maybe it's worth sending folks to a boot camp to spend 5 days to 10 days in an environment hands-on. But when you're thinking about keeping your skills fresh, like you just mentioned, right, you have the skills already. It's really about making sure you're filling in the gap. You understand the Delta content. You're refreshing where needed, where things are, you know, you haven't been in focus for some period of time. There it needs to be much easier to access the content. And there are some people who want that bespoke in-person experience. There's some people who want access to a virtual coach or an instructor for 1 to 2 hours. There's some people who need those hands-on exercises. There are other folks who say, I just want to read the documentation and correctly assess so I can signal to the market that I am up to speed, that I have these skills and I've been working on them for some time. And so that's where you see a lot of our investment coming into the simplification of our content. And at Sapphire, we teased learning.sap.com. I'd encourage everybody to go there and check it out, which is for developers, you know, the beginning of some of this content around BTP specifically, where we believe everybody needs a baseline of knowledge in our community to be able to go and access some of that baseline content, not the premium, not those premium environments, not this, you know, one-to-one instruction that we provide in Learning Hub, not the access to sort of live systems, but just with your trial account and a basic learning journey, how far can you get? And you'll see a lot of investment over the coming years in trying to make that type of content consistently available so folks can get skilled up. The last thing that I'll say, and I know I'm running on about this because I think this point is really important, is at the same time that we're making it easier for everybody in the professional community to access some of that baseline content and get certified, we've also made a huge step this year in making Learning Hub available for our University Alliance university partners, of which we have hundreds of thousands of students around the globe who have access through their university to various types of SAP training. But here we've made Learning Hub completely free for them. And
that's
what
really
we've
good.
done,
I love
sorry.
it. I love it.
Yeah. And my big ask for you and for our partners in the consulting ecosystem is when you go and recruit, if you're at a University Alliance university, tell people to go skill up on our dime, right? Like, it is free for all of you, and I want you to espouse the message because SAP is happy to foot the bill for students who are getting skilled up on SAP.
I think that's really good news. I mean, it was somehow affordable for students already, or at least I as a company would pay for my students I work with, because I think during your studies, or at least at the end, if you maybe have some time until you enter a job, you can take your time and to gain some SAP knowledge, especially if you study economics or economics in combination with computer science. I think this is, you cannot leave your studies without knowledge about the world market leader in ERP software. This is, and it makes you much more interesting for possible employers to onboard you, because on the other side, as we already heard, it takes time. It's quite high for an employer to pay this. And so I think this is a great news for students to enter this topic. But let me ask you something else. The other week, I was speaking to a guy who asked me, who wants to enter the consulting market. He has already some experience as key user. And I am interested, to hire people. There's so few people, or too few people on the market, so to say, to do all the migrations and implementation projects. But he has to upskill, and he started me, where should I start, Peter? Tell me, I want to improve my knowledge, but how to start? Do you have any advice where to start?
Shameless plug, completely shameless plug. I think TechEd's a really good place to start. Not only is TechEd, for the reality of it is, I think TechEd is a great place to start because you get access to and an understanding of the broad portfolio of technology that SAP has to offer. And I think when I speak with folks on campus, for the most part, they want to understand what SAP's products do, right? We have Sapphire, and Sapphire is a wonderful event. And Sapphire is targeted, for the most part, and I'm sure I'll get in trouble somewhere for saying this, but we're targeting Sapphire at the conversation with our buyers, right? Those C-level executives by LOB at the CIO level, thinking about kind of broad scale business problems. When I come out of university, I'm trying to think about, how to get started, how to understand what's actually the job. And TechEd is a much more targeted event for helping people to understand what the job is. What are the technologies? What's so interesting about being associated with the foundation of business process versus coming in and using a generic platform to kind of work on business problems? And so I think you get a lot of that at TechEd, and you also get, when you think about that Channel 1 experience, it'll be there this year, that was there last year. The community engagement, the customer engagement that happens there is just a lot more hands-on, right? It's a lot more specific, it's a lot more practical. And so I think, the good news is if you're answering that question now in that fall recruiting cycle, I would encourage everybody to kind of be talking about the value of TechEd. And as things go digital, the other advantage that we have is we can bring that learning to everybody. We're not asking folks to fly into a location and pay a meaningful price tag. There's rather low friction to getting involved. And I can say we will be following up in a meaningful way this year on TechEd, on the learning that happens within the community, within groups and kind of affiliate entities that we can create so that learning doesn't stop. And so I really encourage everybody to head there. Segues in perfectly to, there's a lot of great content on the community. We have these types of calls. We have the ability to follow topics of particular interest. And so if you're just starting out, there's a wonderful opportunity to track in that direction as well. And then lastly, our learning assets, whether it's OpenSAP, learning.sap.com, or Learning Hub, can give you, once you have that tidbit, right, that insight of what you want to do, there's a really good opportunity to dive a bit deeper in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, especially regarding tech ed. I also found that it's a good opportunity to meet people and to learn about technology. But I'm missing something similar for the functional side. I would love to see how is Ariba working, or the logistic business network, or other SAP products which came on the market, which I don't know because I'm an S/4HANA guy.
Mhm.
But I mean, there's not such a conference. I felt more like user groups maybe, or where can I go and experience this?
So it's amazing that you say that. And this is the challenge that we have with having these big in-person events. We had Success Connect and we had Ariba Live, right? And there were, and I actually forget the name of what we changed and then changed back the CX facing conference, but we've had solution area conferences. But the challenge that we have when it's limited by who's in that room is it is so highly targeted and so exclusive that we haven't been able to cross-pollinate content. And so I actually know that Joe Popelka, when it comes to the content around our HXM portfolio, was just yesterday filming that content for broad digital distribution. And so we're going to have the opportunity, Peter, just to that point, to start using the community as that nexus to ensure folks get access to all of that information. Now, I will say, and we've talked about this in the past, and I believe really strongly in this, and I know Thomas Grassel, who leads our community efforts as well, is supporting me and the team in figuring this out. But we also, need to be proud of the fact that the SAP professional community around kind of operational excellence and operational process is robust. And I'd say there's a big gap, right? Procurement, we've had kind of lines of business, focused companies that have been there. We've had the same thing in HR. And so there's sort of this model for building expertise and diving deep. SAP has been so dominant for such a long time when it comes to true business process at multinational scale for lots of good reasons based on the foundation of the technology that I think we've missed an opportunity to build some of that kind of community and advocacy around that operational, like that business process expert who can be involved. But it is such an important skill set today, especially as we deal with issues around climate change and sustainability, because where do you find leverage? You find leverage in figuring out how to do things differently, right? How to manufacture close to the edge with locally sourced materials. And that's not a technology problem, right? That's somebody who's thinking about the whole system. And so you'll see more and more of our investment into this as well, not just using the content that's already there from some of the acquired companies and the communities they've built, but you'll see a lot of investment into this kind of operational process expertise community and how we kind of focus and try to engage there as much as we've done in technology and as much as we've done in some of the SAP solution area communities to really build that out, because we should be proud, we should own it. And frankly, if we don't, we're missing a big opportunity to drive change in the ecosystem around some of these issues around sustainability and climate change.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so shall we have a look what we have in question and answer? Questions from the community here with us?
Sure, that is a great idea. Thanks for the conversation so far. So we have some really upvoted question here. Coming from an anonymous attendee, Max, how do you see the career of SAP software developers being affected by low code, no code, and AI?
Here's my take on tools like low code, no code, and AI. So there was the computer is this magical box that renders whatever you want it to render. And the easier that it's gotten over history for us to build kind of great software that either shows up on a mobile device or through a browser window, the more software that we've seen take on new challenges for us. Right? We haven't seen a shrinking of the market as the tooling has gotten better. And so as I look at low code, no code, and AI, what I see is the possibility for the market to expand, because there's no shortage of tough problems for us to solve as developers. And there are a lot of problems that are sort of rather benign that we end up dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so as we introduce tools like low code, no code systems, right? What we end up doing as a developer is thinking about what is that integration architecture so we can ensure data lineage, right? But we shift the, how am I putting this button in this place, right? So I can satisfy the needs of a small kind of satellite operation for their office reentry program, right? To the actual business user that's not managing the data stewardship, the location, the streaming data management, all of those tough challenges, but instead is focusing on, the UI design of an app that's only used by 10 or 15 people. And that's a great thing, right? It expands the total market for digitization. And so there will be more people who will be quote unquote developers. Some of them will be low code, no code developers who are just thinking about, how do I rapidly create in these COEs, these tiny little apps. And it will also allow those highly skilled developers who are, focused on tougher, more technical challenges to focus more of their time on the things that matter. And I think as we teach and as we educate around low code, no code, around RPA, around these types of sort of technologies from an SAP perspective, that's also how, you'll see us talking about the role of those tools in our broader portfolio. So I think it's a good thing. It's going to expand the market. It's going to make hardcore devs' life less frustrating, because you're not going to be thinking about pixel perfect button implementation on a screen that nobody's going to look at. And it will also open up access. So, every department in every, country and every company will be able to get their sort of custom built application for their needs. And so that's all a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I should say, by the way, AI is a separate conversation, because I think, there we're going to have more skills that we need to bring to the development population to be more data savvy. It is clear that algorithms have always been a part of what we've done, but understanding how to best implement with data intensive applications, predictive systems that simplify business process, that take work out of human hands, requires us to continue up leveling our skills. So that's the perfect counterposition to the low code, no code side of the world, where we need to be teaching more of that in-depth understanding and providing it, especially as we know, there are a ton of byproducts of improperly implemented algorithms that deliver outcomes we don't want. And so as developers, it behooves us to be thinking about and being able to ask those questions, right? Versus just blanket out of the box implementing some engine that's going to get us an outcome that we probably don't want.
I also think that this no code or low code development, we have had these tools in the past, and it hasn't decreased development. There's always a need to develop things, and as a developer, you're mostly also flexible in different programming languages and environments, and so there's always something to do. This is my experience from projects, to do individual add-ons for specific industries which the mainstream SAP processes don't cover. And this is needed, and it will be needed in the future. AI is just in its very beginning. There's so many ideas out there how to use it, and it's not integrated yet. The tools are there, and so it needs project teams and developers to connect these ideas with each other.
100%. I'll leave with this as well, Peter. I think you'll appreciate it. When anybody asks me about low code tools, I typically say, it's been quite some time that SAP has been using a low-code, highly opinionated language for development. We call it ABAP, and there's a reason it got development speed up when we started building business applications, right? And so the tools that we use now are just an extension, and that we're building on, of making those same gains in terms of developer productivity.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting question from Lisette. She's asking, are you thinking about improving the current exam process? I wonder what is there to improve. Maybe Lisette can tell us what she thinks is not good about this process. Maybe you can, Svea, unmute Lisette so that we can hear from her in person what she thinks should be improved.
Lisette, you will be able to talk.
My experience with the process was not very pleasant. I took on my first exam. I started my program last year at the university, and 2 semesters. The first exam I was not prepared, but on September 5th, I took the exam again, and the system did not record my answers. I caught that, and when I asked the proctor was very rude and told me that there's no other place you can take the exam anyway, and he just brushed me off, and it left a bad taste in my mouth, and
I can
I'm not
imagine.
comfortable of taking the exam anymore. And I think that's one of the things that I think SAP should improve. I listened to Peter. I'm a new beginner. I just started, had no SAP experience, but I learned a whole lot from Open SAP. Just Open SAP courses alone taught me that 80 questions do not make you turn you into a consultant. So the system of certification, I have no confidence in it the way it is not right now. So I would like to know if you're gonna improve it. As the other SAP SVP said, you're gonna come up with a badge system so that people accumulate badges. And I want to purchase, I want to pay for my certification. But the badge system that you have, I can tell you, it worked for me. I learned a whole lot in the past couple of months. What I need to put myself on the market as a consultant on my own.
I love the comment on the question, because it's two things. One is it's an opportunity for us to dive in and try to better understand what happened. And what I can say at a minimum is we are looking at the certification experience more broadly, and really trying to make sure that is taken care of. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if anyone else is, so maybe worth Svea kind of muting. But
my message went to the wrong email address. I send an email, but I got a message that it went to the community email address.
Send me an email. It's just max.wessel@sap.com, and we'll make sure we get it action. Yeah. But the other thing that I was going to say on this is, I'm glad that the badge experience was good with the Open SAP team. In fact, we're re-architecting the badge experience. And the Open SAP team is, what we've challenged them to do is think about how can we get consistent kind of knowledge badges and frameworks across all of our learning assets. So that experience that you had is going to be the foundation for kind of our go forward environment. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is knowledge badge equivalence. So where can we say, for the most part, if you go down this path with us, that you have achieved equivalence in your learning, even if you're not entirely there.
There was one thing Lisette just said, which was like, when I did the exam or the certification, it doesn't make me a consultant. Of course it doesn't. I mean, being a consultant means you have a lot of experience working with the system, knowing how to do the customizing, knowing the process of project phases and management, although you're not a project manager, right? So, but if you want to move into this direction, the first step you have to do is to get to know the business processes implemented in the system, whether it's S/4HANA or Ariba or wherever you're interested in. And so the first step will be that you get a training and that you get a certification so that others can see, yes, you've been in this thing. You have knowledge about it, basic knowledge. This is the first thing you always start with, yeah? And there's trial systems. We were just talking about developers, but there's for S/4HANA as well. There's the S/4HANA cloud trial. You can use it for free, 14 days. Then it will be reset the content for you, and you can again prolong it as much as you like. There's tutorials you can use to get a hands-on user's experience. And this is something I would recommend you to do if you want to get into this S/4HANA thing. Is S/4HANA cloud. Yes, it only has not all the processes you have in S/4HANA, but it has enough for you to learn, especially as a beginner, to get knowledge in this. And of course, it's always good not to learn alone. Find yourself a learning group. Go to your local SAP community, Stammtisch, Inside Track, whatever there isn't anything in your town, then you just start it by write a blog in the community.sap.com. Hey, I live in, I don't know, and I want to start a Stammtisch. Who's going to be with me? So what else questions do we have?
I think this question from Mark is very interesting about the dual education system, which has been created in Germany, like Daimler Bosch and so on. And if this can be possible into the US too, you know, you are in the company, you're working in the company, but in parallel, you are going to study, right? So this dual system.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of great examples of, you know, in the US, we call the dual system for the most part co-ops, right? And there are some engineering schools. I know Northwestern has an engineering co-op. And in fact, SAP has talked with the Northwestern Engineering School about potentially being a co-op partner. Good engineering program. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of engineering teams based in downtown Chicago. But the idea of getting people out to the Bay Area, to Newtown Square, New York, wherever it might be, is definitely in focus. So I think that there is opportunity. I think that in the US in general, we do a bad job of training people professionally in university. Dead stop, right? You know, we kind of, for the most part, give folks a humanities education or a basic education in STEM in undergrad, and then send them to graduate school to do professional development or vocational development. And so I continue to be impressed by the scope and depth and the quality of the folks that come into the SAP ecosystem in Europe through these types of experiences. And I assume that over time, especially as we have some more education reform in the US, there will be more and more tailwind for this type of opportunity. But I'm, at least as SAP, we see it increasing. And I know Karina Edmonds, who runs our University Alliance program, for instance, has been on a tour of business schools to try to get them to adopt kind of these types of kind of vocational or co-op training programs around business analytics and process, again, in this bend of process transformation for sustainability and climate change. So I think blueprint that we can follow better in the US and North America more broadly.
So I see here's a question voted high. What is the future scope of S/4HANA financial accounting? I must say I have no knowledge about this. I think Max hasn't either. Or are you a hidden S/4HANA functional accounting consultant? No.
Yeah, I am not.
Okay,
so we can certainly follow up if there are specifics on that one with Jan Gilgan team to make sure that we can go.
But let's think about, without addressing Jan Gilg, if somebody has such good questions, where could you possibly find an answer?
One might be able to go ask specific questions on the community, right? Yes. Certainly. So I think there's plenty of information there. I think there's experts on that side of the world. I do think what we can and should do, to the extent that kind of questions are specific, I mean, these are the exact conversations to facilitate in this context as well.
Yeah, and also again, local community. I mean, met your financial accounting peers in your town, in your community, ask them, look out for online insight tracks or other online activities. I think it's more easy than ever to get information since everybody's now doing online events. Maybe your employee is member of a user group, ASAC or DSAC or any other countries. Maybe if he is a member, he can give you access to their website, and there you find informations. Or you Google for SAP roadmap financial accounting, then you should find the roadmap. Which is on the roadmap, new functionalities coming up. I think there's plenty of possibilities to find experts. Yeah.
And Devraj just raised his hand in the chat to take the question on offline. So feel free to reach out to Davraj. And by the way, to the extent that you have access as well to whether it be Learning Hub or any of the other.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a student, I don't know where you are. Possibly you already have experience. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask what is the future. So, yeah. So what else? What other kind of questions do we have? It's all voted. Maybe the audience can vote more on the questions. Too few voting.
Yeah, there was a question actually in Twitter, which
one
of the
I'm not
colleagues.
monitoring that.
No, one of the colleagues has entered this year. How are learning technologies at SAP embracing mobile delivery? For example, enable now and in-app guidance. Maybe this question.
One of the things that I believe is very critical to SAP's evolution more broadly is we need to go from mobile as a second format, right, to mobile first kind of design ethos. So everything that we're doing around the learning.sap.com relaunch is designed with mobile in mind, as you'll see, right? So that learning experience, that sort of the default to modular segments that can be completed in minutes, not hours. Is all about how do you get an experience, or how do we deliver an experience that is mobile friendly from a learning perspective. Every change you see will be oriented in that direction from the topic of learning. Certainly from an in-app guidance perspective, we need to have mobile friendly applications to drive this forward. The other thing you'll see is we've just our new Chief Design Officer, Ben Leonard, I think I can still say new because he's been at SAP less than a year, is in the midst of a really major kind of, I wouldn't say kind of reorientation from a design perspective, but he's going through like the concept, the experiments for what we can do to simplify app screen design, kind of UI element design, et cetera, that is truly mobile first in nature, where things convert and we get this kind of simplest kind of card that could be made possible. You saw it with the launch at Sapphire of the kind of renewed SAP mobile application. And so this is where I think you'll see a lot of progress in the coming years. Because we know that whether it's an iPhone or an iPad or an Android device, that the first connection that we all have to the internet is often not our PC or Mac. And we need to make sure that the SAP information and actions that we're trying to drive people to take are in that environment. And that is learning as well as everything else SAP is doing.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's the device number one people take to learn, yeah. Especially if you're in the underground or traveling, going to work.
And for learning, it's like it begs all sorts of questions. How do we deal with limited connectivity and offline capabilities? How do we think about the format of documents? I know we've had lots of conversations and questions from the community in terms of, I don't want to download a PDF because it doesn't render well on mobile, which is why I need to think about text rendering in browser and app, right? All of these questions from a technical perspective, they're rather straightforward or simple, but they require a whole lot of thought from a design system perspective. And so we've got great engagement from a new design team that's supporting us as we really transform this experience for our learners.
And Max, maybe another question. Is there any possibility for participants to improve the course or, the content? We recently had this open documentation initiative. I think it's great for this help documentation, because if I find something is missing, I want to add it. I mean, couldn't this be in general a concept for any kind of learning content to not only give a feedback and say the trainer was such and such and there was missing such and such in the chapter, but also to influence this and to see I have made an impact as a learner for my follow learners, or how do you say, yeah?
Yeah, openly, I haven't thought about the GitHub-based implementation. Now my wheels are spinning on, maybe we actually have a solution for this, but we have embedded Qualtrics into the learning platform. So folks can not just give feedback on the overall outcome, but in every screen and every module that they can actually click and submit feedback on that particular object. So we can continue to transform the experience over time. And we have that, data trail of here's where sentiment was high, sentiment was low, specific comments were X, Y, or Z. So we can really do that. And if you go right now, we just have the one learning journey in learning.sap.com. But if you go through and click around, what you will see is that on every screen, every module, there is this, help dialog button that you can click into, and you can really give us very, very candid feedback.
Okay, so what else do we have from the audience? Svea?
Yeah, maybe something about the SAP Learning roadmap. Devraj is asking about it. What's on?
What's on the SAP Learning roadmap? So at TechEd, I can't give everything away. I need to point you to TechEd and hope that you join. There's lots coming at TechEd. There's what I will say a big orientation towards improving the quality and accessibility of our developer-facing content over the next year.
And let me just mention, so that it's clear for everybody, TechEd is for free. I mean, in the past years on site, we had to pay 2,500 euros to get a ticket. And now it's free. Channel 1 is streamed without registration, even on YouTube. And all the other tracks where Max will speak and his colleagues, they are free of charge, but you have to register and build your agenda. And I think this is also really great that SAP went this way, and hopefully it will stay this way somehow. Even if we return to on-site meetings, maybe we can have a hybrid meeting, having still channel 1 and streaming content. Yeah, and why not streaming content about functional aspects too? Why not have a channel where you stream content about how different applications work, some kind, not only marketing, but more from a process point of view. Like, why not have an SAP television channel all day long? I mean, people want to learn. You just go there and it can repeat. I mean, it could be like, financial accounting, what is coming up? I mean, we have this on YouTube, don't we? I mean, Jan and Sven Deniken also, they have these YouTube channels and you can watch them. So,
and I think, the strange thing about the pandemic and what you'll see is the innovation. I mean, there are lots of things that were, crises we responded to in moment that will change. But this idea that we will be developing content, streaming content, engaging people digitally, I don't think that goes away as we get back to an in-person environment or anything. So continued kind of engagement there. But thank you for pointing out, Peter, when I say we'll be unveiling and going deep on some of the topics at TechEd, that really is an open invitation to anyone at no cost. But what you will see is some of the announcements around again, our commitment to simplified access and discovery, as we've done with learning.sap.com, and making developer content kind of clearly more user-friendly, more mobile-friendly, more accessible. You'll see the same thing with the certification journey, right? As we kind of reimagine what this looks like from a user experience perspective, there will be big improvements coming to our or innovation rather coming to the community in terms of how we enable groups and affiliation to emerge. And so I imagine there will be a lot of exciting stuff for all of you who are interested that we unveil at TechEd, and I'm excited for the specifics as we unveil officially.
Yeah, for sure. There's also non-tech information, like you're talking about learning. For sure, S4HANA will be in it as well. And I just recently saw also a post for a training you could join to see what is upcoming with the next version. And this is, when I'm right, this is for free as well. You just take your time. I think this, for me personally, this is the most challenging part, to take my time to educate myself. I already know a lot, but I'm still a learner. In many ways, being a consultant is never boring. You always get new customers, new questions, new challenges in interpreting how it was meant, this process, and how can you adapt it to the customer needs with and without programming. And so I'm also always on the search for knowledge, and maybe Max, one question I have, there are topics where there is no learning content. For instance, I'm a consultant for global trade management. There's no book, there's no training, no nothing. I always learn from somebody I met who knows something. Even colleagues from SAP, they are very helpful, product management and so on and so forth. And of course, there is some in the community and here and there, but there's no specific training. And there are trainings, they are not held. I mean, there's one about a commodity pricing engine, and it's like you have to request it. So what can we do? Can this be put online as an e-learning, or can we make a vote for what is missing and then you produce something, or what is with the missing content? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I think we have two sides of that, right? So we have content that we're missing, and we have content that we continue to maintain that, frankly, very few people engage with on an annual basis, if any. And so one of the big challenges, and I know our team has taken on, and where we turn to the community for a lot of feedback. So when we kind of think about the role that the community in this dialogue between learning or SAP education and the community has more broadly, this is one of those key areas. I believe right now we have 155 active certification journeys, of which there's a pretty long tail, right, in that last 40 or 50 certifications that aren't widely used. And we invest in maintenance of all of that content at the expense of things that we know folks would desire. I think it's a great idea to kind of formally incorporate, voting and guidance from the community. What I can say is very much part of the roadmap is like the introduction of these kind of the groups that we know that we'll be bringing to the table, right? When it comes to how do we build communities of practice around each of these topic areas that we have so much at the forefront, will be an enormous lever in helping us to define that roadmap, because we can't do it alone. In fact, what you hear is we've been working a lot to make sure that the same voices are not amplified to drive the learning roadmap over time. So we've gotten broader and broader and broader. And when we can tap into the community and really look to the 3 million monthly visitors to guide the direction that we need to take SAP, we'll be far better off for it. I would also say, what you point out around, there's always somebody, and there are people here and there in the community who will get involved. Great kind of appreciation for the community team, in so much as their focus and the transparency that they've had inside of SAP and our product management teams on the speed to answer questions. So for all of our product groups, one of the things that we've started to document and share on a monthly basis inside is how many questions have been asked, what was the speed to answer those questions, whether they were acceptable. So in those places where we don't have formal learning documented, at minimum, what we know is that we're continuing to provide feedback on specific questions in a very timely fashion. And so that, so everybody is aware. I mean, that's been a great self-started initiative from the community team that makes it extremely transparent to everyone inside of SAP how product management teams are engaging directly to answer questions.
Yeah, cool. There's a little time left. Maybe we can give the honor to the community to have one last question.
Yeah, I think here is a well-upvoted question from Mohammed. Does SAP is planning to tie up with the online learning portals like Udemy or Simple Learn, etc. in future?
It's a great question. I'm going to answer this. So you're going to get, this is more sausage making than I think anybody expected. The short answer is I would love to. The long answer is I would love to. And the first thing that I started when we came into the role was an evaluation of this. Turns out, as we turned and spoke with a lot of folks from the community, we included our partners, right? We went out and talked to Google, who built initially their delivery for Coursera and then brought to Pluralsight and then insourced, that the learning modalities are different enough across the platforms that what Google experienced was they basically had to build 2 courses for one piece of content. because Pluralsight and Coursera were different enough from each other and different enough from Udacity in terms of how they supported and maintained, that they actually found they couldn't deliver high enough quality at high enough volume in order to make it kind of worthwhile, right? Because they basically said we need to cover a third of the portfolio if we do it in this format. So what I think you'll see from us is some pieces of content that we think are broad enough to merit being in those types of environment where we work to expand to other platforms, but we do that in an extremely considered fashion because we better understand now, and I've had those conversations with my peers at other technology companies who've been a bit burned in terms of overcommitting and then effectively under delivering on quality and the variety of content. About how we approach it, but it's very much on the radar. We very much want to explore, and as we drive to the new digital kind of modalities, make sure we show up where people learn, but we want to be conscious that it doesn't come at the expense of the quality and variety of the learning content we bring to the table.
Okay, so
Thank you very much.
Have we come to the end? Do we still have time, Svea?
No, I don't think so. We have a hard stop where there were really so many and so great questions. And I think, yeah, the SAP community is a place where we can move on with our conversations. And as you have seen in the chat, I have posted a lot of links there. Also, our future offerings for the SAP community calls, I'm going to post here. So I think there is definitely the opportunity to proceed with our conversations. And yeah, a big thank you to you, Max, for taking the time, and for Peter as well, of course, having this great conversation here in the SAP Community Call series. And I hope to see you somehow soon. And everyone, encourage you to join SAP TechEd. As Peter mentioned, it's for free, and there might be really great content coming up. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Svea. This is great. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, community, for showing up and coming by. Looking forward to see you in person.
Bye.
Bye.